You're staring at your screen. And the report you spent 3 days building, 47 pages of data analysis. An AI just recreated it in 3 seconds. Not a rough draft, a better version, more accurate, more detailed. Cleaner formatting. You close your laptop, walk to the break room, and for the first time in your career, you can't answer a simple question. What am I actually for? That question, what are humans actually for, is the beating heart of Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari. Harari is an Israeli historian at Hebrew University who spent years studying how humanity conquered the world. And this book is his terrifyingly precise prediction of what happens next. We're going to cover every major chapter, so by the end, you'll have the full pictures, from how humans became gods, to why that might be the most dangerous thing that's ever happened. The thing that separates us from every other species on Earth is our ability to create shared fictions. Harari calls them intersubjective realities, things that exist only because millions of humans collectively believe in them. Not objective realities like mountains or rivers. Not subjective realities like personal opinions. Something in between. Stories that become real because everyone treats them as real. Money is the perfect example. Sam works 50 hours a week, earning $48,000 a year. But what is a dollar? It's a piece of paper with ink on it. Or more accurately now, it's a digital number on a screen. Those numbers have value because everyone agrees they have value. The moment 8 billion people stop believing in the dollar, it becomes worthless ink on cotton. It's like a magic spell that only works because everyone is casting it at the same time. The most powerful force in the global economy is a collective hallucination. And it's not just money. Nations aren't real. You can't trip over the border between France and Germany. There's no line painted on the ground where the dirt changes from French to German. Corporations aren't real. Apple doesn't exist in the physical world. You can touch an iPhone, but you can't touch Apple, the company. Human rights aren't real. Actually, there's no human rights molecule floating in the air. These are all stories, fictions that exist in the shared imagination of billions of people. But here's where it gets interesting. These fictions aren't weaknesses. They're our superpower. A single chimpanzee can beat a single human in a fight, easily. But get a million humans who share a story, a religion, a national identity, an economic system, and they become unstoppable. No other species can coordinate at that scale. No other species can build cathedrals or stock markets or space programs. 70 billion farm animals exist in factory farms right now. Fewer than 4 billion wild mammals remain on the entire planet. Humans didn't dominate Earth through strength. We dominated through stories. Sam started thinking about this on his lunch break. He looked around the cafeteria and something clicked. His job title, that's a story. His salary, a story. His company's stock price, and a story. His country's laws, stories agreed upon by millions. The building is real. The desk is real. The sandwich in his hand is real. But the corporation that owns the building, that's a story. The money that pays his salary, another story. The pension plan he's counting on for retirement, yet another story. Sam's entire professional life operates inside a web of shared fiction. And it works. It works precisely because nobody stops to question it. Now, this next part is what really changed how I think about religion. Harari takes the shared fiction concept further. He says humans didn't just create useful fictions. We created entire religions out of them. And he doesn't just mean Christianity or Islam or Judaism. He means something much more provocative. Science and religion are usually treated as enemies. The great battle between faith and reason. Harari says that framing is wrong. They're not enemies, they're partners. Religion provides legitimacy and meaning, the why of existence. Science provides power, the how of changing the world. Neither can run a civilization alone. You need the power to build a hospital and the meaning that tells you why healing people matters. And here's the twist that most people miss. The Enlightenment didn't destroy religion. It created a new one, humanism, the worship of human experience, human feelings, and human choice. Think about the phrases we treat as sacred. Follow your heart. The customer is always right. The voter knows best. If it feels good, do it. These aren't scientific statements, they're articles of faith. faith in the supremacy of human feeling. We replaced one religion with another and barely noticed. And this is the part most people get completely wrong. Harari says modernity itself is a deal, a covenant, and it's a deal with a hidden cost. Humans agreed to give up meaning in exchange for power. Pre-modern humans lived in a universe where everything had purpose. God had a plan. Suffering had meaning. Death led somewhere. Every tragedy was part of a larger story. Modern humans live in a universe where we have enormous power, but no cosmic purpose. We can split atoms and edit genes and land robots on Mars, but we can't answer the question, why are we here? We traded meaning for control, and most of us didn't even notice the exchange. It's like selling your childhood home for a sports car. The car is faster, more powerful, more impressive. But sometimes late at night, you miss the home. That ache, that quiet sense that something is missing even though you have more than your grandparents ever dreamed of. That's the cost of modernity. 3 branches of humanism emerged from this deal. Liberal humanism, trust the individual's feelings. Socialist humanism, trust the collective's feelings. Evolutionary humanism, trust natural selection and survival of the fittest. The 20th century was a war between these 3 branches. Fascism represented evolutionary humanism. The strong should rule. Communism represented socialist humanism. The collective should decide. And liberal democracy represented liberal humanism. The individual matters most. After 2 world wars, a Cold War, and countless conflicts, liberal humanism won. Your feelings matter. Your vote counts. Your choices define you, but here's the thing. That victory might have been temporary. Because now, and this is where the book takes its darkest turn, science is discovering something that threatens to blow the entire humanist project apart. Free will might not exist. Sam always believed he chose his career. He chose to study data science in college. He chose this company over 3 others. He chose his apartment, his morning routine, his favorite coffee shop. Every major decision felt like his. But neuroscience experiments have shown something deeply unsettling. Brain scanners can predict a person's decision seconds before the person consciously knows they've decided. The neural activity fires first. The feeling of choosing comes after. You don't decide, and then your brain acts. Your brain acts and then tells you that you decided. Think of it like this. Imagine you're watching a movie, but you believe you're directing it. You feel like you're calling the shots, choosing what the characters say, deciding when the scene changes. But the film was already shot. Your brain made the call, then sent you a polite memo saying, "Hey, here's what we decided." Your conscious experience of choosing might be a story your brain tells you after the fact, the most elaborate illusion in the universe, and you're living inside it. If that's true, and the evidence is piling up fast, then the entire foundation of humanism collapses. Follow your heart? Your heart already decided before you were aware of it. The voter knows best. The voter's neurons know best, and they're not consulting the voter's consciousness. Personal responsibility, morality, the justice system, the entire structure of liberal democracy. All of it rests on the assumption that you are making decisions. Harari calls this the time bomb in the laboratory. The same science that built humanism is now destroying its foundation. Okay, so if that was surprising, wait until you hear this, because this is where Sam's story at the beginning connects to something much bigger than losing a job. Harari introduces what he calls the Great Decoupling. And this might be the most important concept in the entire book. For all of human history, intelligence came packaged with consciousness. If you wanted someone to drive a car, diagnose a disease, analyze data, or compose music, you needed a conscious human mind. Intelligence and consciousness were inseparable, like 2 sides of the same coin. You couldn't have one without the other. Not anymore. Artificial intelligence provides intelligence without consciousness. An AI can drive a car better than Sam, but it doesn't experience driving. It can diagnose cancer more accurately than the best doctor on Earth, but it doesn't feel concern for the patient. It can analyze data in 3 seconds instead of 3 days, but it doesn't know it's analyzing anything. It has no inner life, no awareness, no experience of existing. This is the decoupling. Intelligence is becoming a commodity, like electricity. You plug it in when you need it. You pay by usage. It's available 24/7, never gets tired, never calls in sick, never asks for a raise, but consciousness. The thing that makes Sam feel his anxiety, experience his curiosity, know that he exists. That's becoming economically irrelevant. The economy doesn't need you to feel. It needs you to perform. And algorithms perform better. And this leads to Harari's most provocative prediction, the one that made headlines around the world when the book was published: the useless class. Not the working class, not the middle class, the useless class. Billions of humans who can't contribute economically because algorithms do everything better, faster, and cheaper. Here's the part that separates this from every previous technological revolution. When the Industrial Revolution killed farming jobs, it created factory jobs. When automation killed factory jobs, it created knowledge worker jobs. There was always a next rung on the ladder, always somewhere to climb. But Harari argues, what if there isn't a next rung? What if the AI that replaces knowledge workers is also better at the new jobs that get created? Our Sam retrained as a prompt engineer after his data analysis role got automated. He spent 6 months learning the new skill. He got certified. He felt proud of himself. 18 months later, the AI could prompt itself. Sam's new career had a shelf life shorter than a carton of milk. The ladder doesn't just have a missing rung. The ladder might not go anywhere. This isn't about one job disappearing. It's about the entire concept of human labor becoming optional. And unlike every prediction you've heard before, where the punchline is, but new jobs will appear, Harari's argument is that this time, they might not. Can you guess what Harari says is the logical endpoint of all this? It's not just unemployment. It's not just economic disruption. It's a fundamental shift in what authority means, and it changes everything. For thousands of years, authority came from God. God says so. Don't question it. The priest knows the truth. The scripture is final. Then humanism shifted authority to humans. What do you feel? What does your heart say? The voter decides. The customer chooses. The individual is supreme. Now, a new religion is emerging. Harari calls it Dataism. And whether you've heard of it or not, you're already practicing it. Dataism says the universe consists of data flows. The value of any entity, human, animal, corporation, government, is determined by its contribution to data processing. Under Dataism, organisms are algorithms. You, me, Sam, we're biological data processors shaped by millions of years of evolution. And the supreme value isn't human happiness or divine glory. It's the free flow of information. Anything that blocks data flow is wrong. Anything that accelerates it is right. And here's the unsettling realization. Sam is already living in Dataism. He just hasn't noticed. Sam picks restaurants using Yelp instead of his gut feeling. He watches movies recommended by Netflix instead of browsing the catalog himself. He drives routes chosen by Google Maps instead of following his own sense of direction. He buys products ranked by Amazon instead of trusting his own judgment. He checks his health through an app instead of listening to his body. Every single day, Sam outsources decisions to algorithms, and he's happier for it. The food is better. The movies are better. The routes are faster. The products are cheaper. The algorithm wins every time. Humanism says, listen to your feelings. Dataism says, listen to the algorithms. They know how you feel better than you do. And honestly, they kind of do. Now pay attention to this because it connects everything we've covered so far. The authority shift isn't coming someday in the distant future. It's already here. We trust algorithms over our own intuition, and we're right to. They usually give us better results. The question Harari asks isn't whether algorithms will make better decisions than humans. That question is already answered. They do. The real question is whether human consciousness has value beyond its data processing capability. Is there something about being aware, about feeling, about experiencing the sunset, or loving your child or knowing you exist? That matters even if an algorithm could do your job better? Is consciousness itself worth preserving, even when it's not the most efficient processor? Harari doesn't answer that question. He leaves it open, deliberately, because it might be the most important question of the 21st century. And it's a question that no algorithm can answer, because answering it requires the very consciousness whose value is being questioned. Sam went back to his desk that afternoon. The AI had already finished his next 3 assignments. His inbox was full of articles about the future of work, most of them written by AI. His calendar had been optimized by an algorithm. His lunch had been chosen by an app. He sat there, and for the first time in months, he didn't think about his career. He thought about consciousness. He thought about the fact that the AI on his screen could process data faster than he ever would. But it would never know it was processing data. It would never feel the Friday afternoon relief of finishing a tough project. It would never experience the satisfaction of solving a problem that seemed impossible at 9 a.m. It would never laugh at a bad joke from a coworker or feel the warmth of sunlight through the office window. The AI had intelligence, and Sam had something else. Something that couldn't be computed, couldn't be optimized, couldn't be reduced to an algorithm. He had awareness. He had experience. He had the ability to know that he existed. And sitting there in his office chair, watching the algorithm do his work, he realized that knowing you exist might be the most extraordinary thing in the universe. Even if the economy doesn't care, whether that matters to the marketplace of 2050 is an open question. Whether it matters to Sam isn't a question at all. Here are 5 things you can start doing right now based on what we just covered. First, audit your algorithm dependency. For 1 full week, track every single decision you outsource to an algorithm. Restaurant choices, driving routes, movie picks, shopping decisions, music selections, news feeds, write them down. You're not doing this to stop using algorithms? They're genuinely useful. You're doing this to become aware of how much authority you've already handed over without thinking about it. Awareness is the first step to conscious choice. And conscious choice is the one thing algorithms can't do for you. Second, develop skills that require consciousness, not just intelligence. Creativity, deep empathy, emotional connection, ethical reasoning, meaning-making, storytelling, genuine human leadership. These are the domains where humans still have something algorithms don't. Invest your learning time in these areas, not just in technical skills that might have a shelf life measured in months. The most future-proof skill isn't coding or data science, it's being deeply, irreducibly human. Third, question the stories you live inside. Harari's biggest insight is that our entire civilization runs on shared fictions. Your job title, your national identity, your economic assumptions, your beliefs about success, these are all stories. You don't have to reject them, but understanding that their stories gives you power. The person who knows they're inside a story can rewrite it. The person who thinks the story is reality is trapped. Fourth, practice present awareness. If consciousness is humanity's unique advantage in the age of algorithms, then strengthening your consciousness matters. Meditation, journaling, genuine face-to-face conversation, deep reading, time in nature, anything that deepens your experience of being alive rather than just being productive. Harari himself meditates 2 hours every single day and goes on a 60-day silent retreat every year. He credits that practice with his ability to see patterns that others miss. The clarity doesn't come from more information. It comes from deeper awareness. Fifth, have the hard conversations about AI now, not later. The decisions being made today about artificial intelligence, data ownership, algorithmic authority, and the future of human labor will shape the next century. Don't wait until the useless class is a reality to think about what kind of future you want. Read, discuss, engage, show up. The algorithms are getting smarter every single day, but they still can't decide what kind of world is worth building. That's still a human job. And it might be the most important one left. That's it for this video. I hope it was useful and gave you something real to think about. Thanks for watching and have a great day.